with any of these highly processed carbohydrate foods, like as you eat more of them, you feel even more crappy. But your body desires more of them, because of all the sugars and whatever else that are in there. Like any carbohydrate food, like your body becomes somewhat addicted to it, even though it makes your body feel bad. And then as you eat more nutritious food and you wean the carbohydrates out of your diet, you require less food to feel good. Like you don't have to feel like the need to snack on a vanilla wafer all the time.
Welcome to the Agriculture Podcast. We are back for another episode this week. Still no guests. Sorry. You just have to listen to us again.
They're coming.
Yeah, we promise they're coming. We want to follow up on a conversation we had recently about farm stores and just what that looks like. So farm stores, direct-to-consumer sales, basically non-conventional agriculture. And what does that look like in the opportunities that there are in that space? And we want to flesh it out a little more than we did when we talked about it last time, because we didn't. We talked about it real quick, but we want to go into a little bit more detail what we think that could look like in the real opportunities that are there. So this chair is like slowly going down.
Yeah. So
welcome to our janky podcast studio. Although I will say this looks really cool.
And over the course of time, we have plans for a podcast studio actually. So we'll be a professional looking setting at some point.
Yeah. Hopefully one day it'll pay for itself.
That's right. Right now it'll just be a fun hobby. Expensive but fun.
Yeah, probably still cheaper than all the Sitka gear you're wearing.
We've been washing a combine out here this morning, and I was thinking about when you said he pulled up, and I was wearing Cooey rain gear, and if you know anything about, the hunting industry, Cooey makes extremely nice gear, but they're extremely expensive gear. Mm-hmm. But the stuff works like it's supposed to. It keeps you dry in, adverse conditions. And I was thinking when he said those clothes are expensive, but a building with a wash space in it's a whole lot more expensive. So I just, for now, until we become extremely successful in podcasting or media, I guess I'll just wear the Cooey jacket.
That's okay. No worry.
Eventually I'll build the 100 by 100 building.
I've seen them. Larson Farms has a nice wash bay.
They do. They have a beautiful area.
And I'm just like, man, and it's not as bad here because it doesn't get as cold, but it's like 10 degrees in Iowa right now. You don't want to pressure wash anything in this weather.
I totally understand why those guys would, spend the money they needed to be able to wash their equipment. Here in Kentucky, it's slightly uncomfortable, but still, it's almost 60 here today. So.
Yeah, you're not. I remember I used to pressure wash trucks in the morning for an excavation company when I was younger, and so I would be there. During the summer, everyone would show up at the yard at 7, and so I'd be there at 5 to get trucks washed. So all the semis and pickup trucks would come in the day before, and we had a rotation schedule. So every single week, every truck's getting pressure washed and scrubbed clean. And you get to about November, and it's like, all right, we're going to come in at 6:30 because we know we're only going to get through one truck. Because you get to the point where you pressure wash something, and it's not this way here probably, but you would pressure wash something and just be a sheet of ice. Seconds later, you'd run the pressure washer over and just a sheet of ice, and you would go to grab the sponge, and you'd have waterproof gloves on with an insulated glove underneath it, and you would pull the soap suds out, and it would just start to crystallize all over your hand. And there's I just got to the point where I was like, what's the point, guys? We're not actually helping. And so, anyways,
that's kind of the great thing about here in Kentucky. If we wait 2 or 3 days, we usually get seasonably, unseasonably warm day that comes up on us where the temperatures, sometimes getting into the 70s here in the winter. So we can always find days to get outside and, wash equipment or whatever we want to do. And ultimately, I find myself, in Kentucky, it gets so hot and humid here. It's so uncomfortable in a building. A lot of times I'll find myself moving things out of our shops to get into the open space to catch a breeze or whatever, So we're kind of at a different, in a little bit different situation than those northern tier states where they have to deal with the cold icy conditions. We just don't deal with that much here.
I love plowing snow. I don't like cold though, so I'm like kind of torn. I'm like I don't want to be out in -10, but it's also like I really enjoy being out plowing snow in a tractor. So
At 45, and used to, and I was a lot more avid hunter when I was younger, in my teens, 20s, and 30s than I am in my 40s. I enjoyed cold weather, and now I've got where if it's below 50, I'm ready to skin to Florida.
you farmers and your Florida trips,
Yeah,
grain farmers, I tell you, all
cold weather gets here, I'm going south. I always joke with Casey Briggs. He's a farmer from South Dakota, and I've got to be buddies with him on Instagram, and he always laughs. I see like snowfall hit, and I'm like, if it snows in Kentucky, I'm in Tampa.
ridiculous. All right. Anyways, farm stores. Yeah. So we're gonna talk about why it's a good opportunity. So I grew up in a small, trendy town in California, Truckee, California. So not a big ag area, but a very outdoorsy. It's very much become a miniature Bay Area in recent years, and so it's been years since I've lived there, but I think specifically, even people I know who are even more on the like conservative side of things really do think a lot about the type of food they buy, or they're health conscious about the food they buy, or they do their best to shop fresh or to shop things that they feel like they can trust. And so we're not going to get into the different certifications that mean very little these days when it comes to food, because you can label packages however you want these days. But with that said, there is a market already forming in a lot of cities that has either existed there, or it's growing in a way that people want the option. At the very least, they want to have more options than just going to Walmart, just going to Target, just going to Aldi or Fairway or whatever grocery store you have in your area. There's a desire to have a more diversified food system, and especially a more local food system. People want that. I think they're still figuring out how to put words to it. I think a lot of people would say, yes, I would want that. I don't think a lot of people are very vocal about saying we need that right now.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people have realized, like there's areas that aren't what I guess you could call trendy or whatever you want to say, but they haven't realized that there is an emerging market out there of direct to consumer agriculture goods. It's an emerging market. It's new or trendy, probably mostly since COVID. Like, not to say that there hasn't been people out there 20 years already in this space, but it's definitely much more of an emerging market than a market that's already developed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a developing market, I guess you could say. So yes, and I think that's something like as that catches on through media, or people travel into different areas, and they come into these more youthful, trendy cities that have already developed these local ag networks, and they see the quality of produce or products that are available, and hey, they want to bring it to their community, and through that, you've seen this market start to gain traction.
Yeah. I personally know of one guy who, not Will Harris, who I've talked about multiple times. One guy out in New Jersey currently. We had talked about doing a project together at one point, and I think it's kind of on the back burner right now. But their goal as a business, and I should see if he wants to come on at some point. I think he'd enjoy that. They would like to open an actual storefront. So he works with he has a full-time job, but he also runs cattle. So he's got his own herd of Angus beef. So he wants to start doing direct-to-consumer sales with that, but he also, his brother does hay and produce. And so they've already been selling the hay and produce at a stand, but they would love to open a storefront in person as well as online to start listing those goods and start having an actual like physical place people can walk into to buy these locally raised goods. And it's not a we're gonna become the next Walmart sort of thing. It's just a very clean, vertically integrated operation that is basically drawing a circle. It's like, hey, this is where we're gonna, sell to. This is our market. We're gonna have an actual brick and mortar store where we're gonna sell to. We'll still sell online. We want that to be an option. It's a good option to have these days. But they're currently looking in New Jersey as a very progressive state. They're very close to New York, so blue state, lots of opportunity for people who are searching for that to start to find stuff like that. And so that's something I look at and like, that's innovative. Like I in my phone conversation with him, he was explaining to me everything. I was like, that is a very clean, efficient business model that also is something I think consumers really want. And he's not, he's not full time. They're very much still starting out. Land is super expensive out there. That is the best option for him to start farming, is to
Yep.
run a business like that. And it's super like, okay, it's still in the early stages, but it's like, I'm not the only one who's had that idea. Neil's had that idea. I've had that idea. This guy's had that idea. There's plenty of other people who are starting to have that idea. It is an emerging market, like you're saying.
Sure. I got the opportunity. I like to travel a lot, and I think it's been about 2 summers ago, we went down to the southern Appalachian Mountains in Georgia, and in that area there, it was historically a timber and very rural area. But with COVID and the amount of people moving into Florida, the locals, Floridians, are being pushed out by coastal elites. So they're beginning to move into southern Georgia, the southern Appalachian Mountains. And with that, those people, it's not like they're poor people. They have money. They had good jobs. They had a lot of them were already established, financially, and so they brought money into that southern Appalachian region. And that southern Appalachian region had been a historical fruit producer, and there was already kind of like small generational orchards in that area. Well, what has happened is those orchards and fruit producers have realized, hey, we have a lot of people with money moving into this area. And what they have done is they've expanded their orchard into farm tourism. And so they have on their orchard, they're baking and selling goods and tours of their operations, and it's become a tourist spot now. Like a whole industry has developed around these orchards from, I guess originally from migration of people, and it's developed a whole new industry and totally revitalized that town. And if you want to go to those towns, like look up LJ, Georgia. It's a very cool area. They have another town called Helen that's very close by, and if you're close to Chattanooga, Tennessee, you're within a couple of hours of this area. And you can see the model that we're talking about here, where you can actually go onto the farm. You'd be able to eat a very high quality meal cooked by a professional chef from their local products. Plus, you can buy goods produced locally on that farm, and you can actually meet the owners of the orchard or the tract of land, there on the site. It's neat. They're actually, not only do they have employees working there, they're working there themselves, and you have the opportunity to meet the grower of the produce that you're consuming on site. So that's a neat opportunity.
Yeah, and proven business model. I grew up in California. Wine tasting is huge out there. I mean, it's not. It's something that I know. Like my dad. I mean, for a long time when they lived near that area, him and his wife, they would go like every other weekend. They'd be going to a different vineyard, a different winery, and meeting people who make this stuff and going and tasting these wines and buying it and spending money there, getting a meal there. And it's like, okay, that's very clearly on the high end of things, but still it's that same mentality as like, there's a whole, not only like one stop shop, like, oh, we could do this for our communities things. Like there are people who are willing to do things like that on a regular basis. I can imagine someone down in Georgia is like, man, like I'm sure there's people who like probably a couple weekends of summer, they're like, let's go check this place out, or we would
Oh,
love to go
sure.
see this. Like what a fun family activity this could be for us to like, oh, well, we'll go to, this peach orchard some week, or we'll go to an apple orchard, like, and just experience all these different things. And so not only is there opportunity for individuals in one area to do, there's individuals in a lot of areas, and there's so much room for everyone. That's the thing, is if it's done right and you're smart about it, it's like, okay, you can be positioned really well over here, and your neighbor 10 miles down the road can be doing just as good as you, and you
Oh,
don't have to be competing all the time for that, because there's enough. Fun fact, there's enough weekends in the year for a lot of people. Hey guys, Clayton here. I'm interrupting your podcast right now to tell you about my media company, Atlas Media Solutions, that makes this podcast possible, as well as all the Denton Farms media happen. So I'm going to play a quick ad real quick that I put together. It doesn't really explain that much, but it does sound pretty cool. So I'm going to let you guys listen to that, and afterwards I'll explain to you what the business is all about. Spend enough time on the internet these days, you start to realize there's a lot of people who don't really understand where their food comes from, what's going on. I figured, hey, rather than complaining about this problem that I feel like the agriculture industry is facing, I should do something to fix it. My name is Clayton Lind. The purpose of this business is to do one thing: serve agriculture. Thanks for listening to that, guys. I won't spend too much time explaining what Atlas Media Solutions is, but Atlas Media Solutions is my media marketing company that 100% exists just to serve agriculture. A lot of my time is spent on the road or on a plane, traveling around the country, producing high quality media material for different ag businesses. And so if you guys want to learn more, please feel free to check out our website or follow me on Instagram. But we just wanted to kind of plug this to let you know that because of this business that I run, it allows all of this stuff with Neil and the YouTube channel to happen in the first place. And so as long as we are sponsor free, I will continue to tell you that this podcast is brought to you by Atlas Media Solutions, and we are proud to say that we are here 100% to serve agriculture. So that's spiel, guys. I'll let you get back to the podcast. Enjoy. Thanks.
actually, I think it makes the industry more vibrant because, like what I noticed with that area down there is, once you have a established, successful orchard that's drawing a ton of people into the area, well, then it allows for other orchards equally as big and successful to pop up. And what happens is, it becomes a tourist niche where you have people flowing into the area constantly to get into one of these orchards and visit. And if you have one orchard there, maybe people visit for a day, but if you have 6, then maybe they're there for the whole entire week visiting each orchard. And they each have a different niche they're very good at, and so it brings the consumer into that area. And with that, they eat at their local restaurants, they stay in the local hotels or VRBOs. They might need who knows what they need. They are going to use the grocery stores, the gas stations, and all the other local business owners. Whatever it may be, they're going to use your shop too. So it benefits the community as a whole, not only the ag producer there.
Mm-hmm. So now let's talk about actual. I would just coin the term farm store. I see a future where there is a grocery store style food store in many towns across the country, big and small, doing one thing very specifically, and maybe broadening into some other supporting products, specifically focused on selling local ag products or very transparent products. Very broad stroke.
Yeah.
If we're thinking nationwide, like, okay, we could source beef from this area, source pork from that area, but mostly a local store where you can either be buying food from other producers to sell in said store, or have a large enough operation where you are producing a lot of your own goods to go in said store.
Yeah, and I think you'll really see a lot of that in the coming years as, as industrialized ag gets more watered down, and you have large amounts of capital available to the owners of these businesses. and these huge commodities have become less profitable, which they are. Like as time goes, they're becoming less profitable over time. It takes a lot more acres to live off of now than it did in 1970.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these owners, such as me, for instance, are going to look for ways to diversify their income and different commodities to produce and products to produce. I think you're going to just because of the state of the industry, you're going to see a lot of people come to this type of where they are diversifying their business to not only large scale ag but into niche products and then having a storefront. Maybe if it's not their farm only, maybe a co-op of farms where each is producing 5 products or something, available to sell at the store, and then the store is able to have 5 or 6 farms that support 40 products for their storefront. You know, I could see this, and I think it's going to become a reality over time.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing of it's good for the community. I mean, if you can open, I think, and we talked about this in our podcast of industrial ag versus like home garden. Um, there, I'm just thinking 10 years down the road, as I always do. If I can already see it. Grocery store checkouts are slowly just all automated. I mean, every time I walk into Walmart, I feel like they've added another row of self checkouts. Our gas stations, our quick start gas stations in Iowa, self checkouts now. I slowly see, and there's a trend towards it as those jobs slowly start to age out because of technology. We're going to need to have other jobs for those people who live in these rural communities who maybe aren't always of higher education or maybe just never wanted to leave, and so they just found a job that allowed them to stay close to home, are going to need jobs. I
Yes.
think of small towns. Dollar General's a major employer in small towns. Gas stations are major employers in small towns. Skilled operating and city jobs where you're working are in small towns. Ag jobs, those are kind of and school jobs. You've got school and government jobs. So those are kind of the main jobs you have around. Your sprinkled tradesmen to support them. There's kind of that lower tier worker that's going to need to be employed if we continue to automate away of a lot of these things. There's a real opportunity for not only there to be a cool farm store to also employ these people. There's also an opportunity for us to start growing more labor intensive crops. If we're going to see automation remove some jobs from the workforce because self checkouts are very efficient. You don't have to wait in line. You don't have to pay that person. You just have to deal with one person standing at the end of them, making sure no one's stealing things, which I'm sure they'll put a robot there at some point too. So we have this opportunity of like, okay, we might have more people entering the workforce who might be more willing to do things that are maybe not as fun as sitting in a tractor, but there's an opportunity to start raising more crops that are more labor intensive, at least physically labor intensive, and actually have a workforce to support that.
Yeah, I think that's for sure. I mean, I think as as this emerging field opens up, it's definitely going to create a need for labor. Just because with any of these, direct to consumer products, it takes a lot of physical labor to produce these products. And right now, the farm community as a whole isn't set up for that type of production. We couldn't, at this farm personally, our workforce is utilized primarily to produce the crops we produce, and we couldn't swing into a niche crop at this time because we don't have enough labor. And so if we did, we would have to acquire more labor, which, creates jobs. And I think, you know, will some of it be addressed through the H2A program? Yeah. But, it will give an opportunity to those who are willing to do that type of work. It'll give them an opportunity. And I think it's a pretty fulfilling life ultimately.
Yeah, you don't meet people very often, even people, I mean, who work hard physical jobs, especially farming. It's like there is just something really rewarding about it, especially touching dirt. I don't know what it is, like feeling dirt in between your hands, like working with plants, like there's just something very fulfilling. Same with animals. There's something very different about taking care of something that's living, and you have to labor over for months to see the final product. But when you do, it's like, oh man, that was really awesome. It puts a grin on people's face that there's it's a
It,
special type of grin.
it's rewarding, to take it for our plants, for instance. If you take a plant from a seedling to a mature fruit producing plant, it's a rewarding feeling. The sweat of your brow, and God's timing with water and whatever sunlight grew that plant, but you had a hand in it preventing the weeds from taking it, and if it needs supplemental water, you watered it, and you kept the pests off of it, like your squash bug or whatever, and you see that fruit come to fruition. You harvested it and sell that product. That is a very rewarding process. It's very fulfilling for your life. So to me, I'd rather grow 1,000 tomato plants in my life and break my back over it than work one day in a Dollar General, just personally. And even if it's going to be harder on my body and hot, I would rather do that than. So I think you know, is weeding in a tomato field going to be the most profitable thing you could ever do? Probably not, but it is probably a pretty rewarding occupation for you if you're in that unskilled position already, you know. And as you learn those skills set, it's building your skills. You're going to be able to eventually acquire, a higher paying job,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately.
Yeah. So opening a farm store is good for employees and employers, hopefully. So in our ideal world, say we are planting, a couple of rows of tomatoes that need to be hand weeded on a regular basis. Like, okay, well, we have that to manage now. So now we have to figure out how at scale do we create something that is actually manageable for a consumer to buy. Um, what do you think the answer to that is?
I think that to me, in the produce world, any of these, not so much. Say if you're if you're a dairy, let's just go for dairy first because
Oh,
I
poor,
can
poor
I
dairy
can
guys.
yeah, the dairy guys. You know, let's say you're a dairy and you're milking cows, but you're struggling being profitable outside of subsidies. But if you created a bottling company that took your product direct to a consumer, you know, then all of a sudden, of course, you've got a whole new list of logistical problems to address, but it begins to make your business more profitable. Um, to me, that is a little easier because your products are bottled. And I know, like, there's still a shelf life on dairy, but to me, it's easier to uh, develop a system to move your products out effectively versus a fruit and vegetable guy that is producing fruit and vegetables just because the shelf life on his product is so short.
Mm-hmm.
So those guys have to be a little bit more innovative versus the dairy guy. And like the dairy guy is it's gonna require a lot more capital. So he's got a different set of challenges than the vegetable guy has. The vegetable guy's got a labor and then a product that's only available for a short amount of season in time, versus the dairy guy who has a huge capital need to develop his business early. They each have different challenges, but they're not challenges that you cannot overcome. And but I think that
But
that is going to be the challenge: is learning how to effectively. I know for me especially, like I've thought a lot of different times of how can I be effective in the fruit and vegetable space, and it always comes down to how do I effectively, if I grew a huge, you know, fruit and vegetable crop or just one fruit or vegetable product, how could I effectively get it to market without a large percentage of it spoiling?
mm-hmm.
You know, to me, that is a huge problem. Not that it cannot be overcome. You just got to
Because
figure out
it,
how to
it has
overcome
been
it.
overcome. by other people.
That's
We've
right.
clearly figured it out at a nationwide scale because you can go into most places and buy said fruit and vegetables without it being spoiled.
That's right.
It exists, but we're at the point where it requires so much the same with dairy. It requires so much capital to develop, to either get freezer systems or get your refrigeration trucks
Yeah.
and your logistics network dialed in so you're not wasting time and making sure it's handled properly, and all the crates that are involved with things like there's
Right.
the hardest part about farming, all that stuff. The reason I think it doesn't exist yet is because it's a logistical nightmare. And logistics, there is a reason the trucking industry is there's so many businesses in it. Like a lot of industries have consolidated a ton. Trucking, very specifically, I've noticed there is still a lot of people, still a lot of individual companies ranging from one truck to five trucks to 5,000 trucks because it's such a complicated industry.
Yeah.
And there's so many moving pieces that you have to work together, especially with all these companies you're working for, brokering freight. That logistical challenge from I have food at my farm, it needs to get to a consumer. The mess in between there is very complicated, and no one's really figured out the best way to do it yet. That's why there are so many trucking companies. That's why shipping packages around the world it's shocking how that even happens in the first place. But like, there's just so many moving pieces that get into that. It's like, okay, it can be done. There's this big logistical challenge in between my fruit, my vegetable leaving my farm to now go over to said storefront or customer's door.
You know,
So here's where I'm gonna like, okay, nationwide is doable. It's really expensive. 2 hour gap though, and that's what I'll probably circle back to that 2-3 hour gap. The 2 hour, 3 hour trip somewhere is enough to move a truck. Is enough to load a truck, unload a truck, move the truck, bring the truck back in a day. There is an 8 hour window where you can move produce in a quick amount of time to a storefront to get it to consumers before it spoils.
Yeah.
There's just that bottleneck of like, how do we time this perfectly to reach there perfectly while still having some amount of worker retention in that. The logistics is there's super high turnover. People are moving companies all the time. There's never consistency in the space.
Yeah, strawberries, for instance, that's something that can successfully be grown here at high quality. Like this is a good strawberry area, and I know there is farms that successfully have grown that crop, and it's a highly profitable crop if you're good at it to grow. And this is one of the things. This is one of the things you'd have to overcome to grow that crop. Is like the berry has just a few days to be in for one, in season, and it only lasts for a few days. And so this is where the farmer has to be creative and either get it to market very rapidly, like in the Nashville market, and there's just such a consumer base there, they can buy your raw and processed strawberry, or you have to come up with a way to, get that strawberry into preserved form through jellies or jams or whatever you want to use your strawberry in. And that's something as the farmer or the farm has to develop if he wants to get into that market.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. It's a tedious, you know, it's one of those tedious things that it's just going to have to be addressed, though, by these. I just feel like for any of us industrialized farms to survive the next 20 years or the next decade, it's a problem each one of us are going to have to address, because I don't think for us to be successful for another generation or two is going to require more than just a corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, or you name your rotation. It's going to require more than just that traditional rotation for you to stay in business.
Yeah, and so for the innovators out there listening to this, it's your job, it's my job, it's Neil's job to figure out how the heck do we grow these crops effectively and make it profitable and survivable. That's the whole linchpin of this whole thing. What is survivable? It's easy to sit here and talk about being profitable, which if you're profitable, hopefully you're going to survive. But we're looking at what's your survivability rate going to be in
Yeah,
the next decade? Are you positioned well that if you had a bad year, you're still going to be able to come out on the other side knowing that you made the right, knowing that you're going to be survivable? You know, there's going to be people who make massive profits. There's, it doesn't matter if you make massive profits one year. You want to be profitable. That's a good part of being a business and being a farmer. But you also need to be sustainable.
that's
And if
right.
you can only be profitable for one massive year and you haven't thought 10 years down the road, it's like, okay, how am I going to position myself to be profitable that year? You know, what will I take a loss this year to know that in 5 years I'm going to stand a better chance against the guy who, you know, shortchanged it and said, I'm going to take a big profit this year? You know, what steps can we take now to position ourselves well to have the farm survive, but also hopefully take a better product to market? You know, not only do that, like, survive, but take something that's actually better for the consumer, better for the grower, and hopefully better for the community to market. And so it can be done. There are examples of it being done. It's now, how do we do that at a nationwide scale, and how do we encourage people to do that at a nationwide scale? Because I sure as heck don't have the time or capital to do something like that
You
right
know,
now.
you know, I think, that's questions we need to be asking each other as ag producers and people that care about ag media, ag. If you're in any portion of the ag space, this is a conversation we all need to be having for the sustainability and just for the overall health of this industry as a whole. These are problems that aren't going to go away as the consumer becomes more educated, and as the consumer wants to know how his food is produced and how high of quality a product they're buying is. These are all things that are going to come to roost if. And we don't want it to just jump up on us all of a sudden. We want to be out in front and leaders in the space, and so that we're managing ourselves efficiently and correctly, so we're not managed by government ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we've addressed the problems as an industry ourselves, then we don't have to be regulated because we've regulated ourselves into what the consumer needs and what we need as a country as a whole.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people who are against industrial ag, and even people who are within the ag industry and are against industrial ag, and are specifically advocating for more regenerative practices, more high nutrient dense food instead of just high volume food, talk about a lot of, there typically is that, like, we need to regulate this stuff. We need to give some sort of incentive to these farmers to actually change. You know,
Yeah.
I hear that a lot, and that's part of the whole carbon credit program that's going through right now. These carbon pipelines. You know, you've got the USDA giving out checks for plant and cover crops now, and, you know, all these things that are like, okay, yeah, the government is pushing towards that. Okay, that's cool. At what point does it become law? That's where we have to draw the line, and that's where I also disagree with all the people who are saying we need to regulate this stuff, because it's like, okay, we're sitting here having this conversation, and maybe it is partially because these people have said maybe we do need to do this, but I look at it as someone, you know, who wants more high quality food in his diet. Like, I would love that. I don't make that much money, guys, and so I need to be thinking about, okay, how can I set myself up in the future to have that opportunity to buy that food? And it might never be cheaper than what we have now. Highly doubt that. But how can we begin to close that gap a little more? You know, we don't have to be the cheapest on the market by any means, but we do have to be at a competitive point for society to want to switch over to that. Because we also, there's consumer bias that people in regenerative agriculture seem to forget about. It's like, people want that food, they don't want to work that hard for it, and they don't want to pay too much for it.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges I think of the fresh food market, is because it does require a lot of labor to produce, and so ultimately it's going to cost you more money to buy as a consumer, and that's, if there is, and this is with any market, if there is a cheap supply of a certain good out there, the other good has to be uh, at least as good or better than that good for you to switch over. And, of course, highly nutritious fruits and vegetables are definitely higher quality food than processed food. but ultimately it becomes a function of the person's budget and their ability to either care about their health enough to select the healthy alternative, or it to be priced competitively enough that it doesn't take so much out of their budget that they're forced to pick the processed version of the product that they're desiring.
Yeah, there's a value proposition that has to be met. And so currently the products that are good for the environment and are the healthiest for you are typically still more expensive than most people want to pay, because it does just cost more to raise that. Here's where the value proposition, I think, in my head begins to change. Okay, it's hard for most general consumers to say, I am going to pay that money for something that is cool and it's trendy, but I don't value enough to pay that extra money. I will, I'm okay with the less nutritious food because it is just more in my price range. So
Yeah.
now you take, sorry, you take the producer who, say, lives thousands of miles away, and you are shipping beef from X state to have your regeneratively grown grass-fed beef coming into your house. So, okay, you have to have money for that. There's a value proposition, and only people who are on the wealthier end of things are going to want to pay for that. Maybe people will treat themselves every once in a while with it if you're lower budget, but it's not going to be a regular thing. Take that regenerative beef producer who lives X states away, bring them an hour away from your house, and you can go to the grocery store in 15 minutes and buy that, and it's the same price. I'm going to be much more likely to buy that beef knowing that it comes from a farmer an hour away and saying, okay, that helped that farmer that I can go meet right now if I wanted to. I am not only doing that, I'm hopefully supporting a local processing facility that also people had to be paid to process that. Not only that, I'm being forward thinking in my community. I'm choosing the climate friendly option for my food, and I'm now helping our local ecosystem. My value proposition just went way up because that is helping my community that I live in. I'm okay to spend those dollars on my community. And that's where the beauty of a 2 hour, kind of like that 2 hour radius, 3 hour radius farm store can really pop in. Is like, okay, I won't pay for that if I have to pay for shipping on top of that to get it to my house. If I know I can spend those dollars and I can go there conveniently to spend those dollars, and it's going to have a positive influx on the back end that I don't see, morally, I can say, I'll spend that extra few dollars because that might help someone I know, or that might be good for our community. Like that the value proposition goes up, and all you did was move a location of where that food is being sold.
I think part of this is already like in the mentality of the younger generation, versus the boomer. I'm not knocking on boomers. I'm not knocking boomers. My dad is a boomer, and they're a great generation or whatever. But where they have a lot more, I don't know, how would you describe them? Either very rigid mindset versus the younger consumer that has a lot more open mindset, that is willing to maybe spend more money, to carve more money out of their budget for high quality products, versus the throwaway society that has kind of been developed over the last 50 years in America, where Americans were pushed into to a very consumer style society, very different than Europe, where your new consumer has more of the European mindset, where they're looking for high quality, maybe less. I don't know what you would call it. Just they can just look away from that hugely produced product. They want things of quality versus quantity, and they don't mind retaining things, not jumping into the
Yeah.
Harbor Freight type
Yeah,
stuff, I guess.
I'm shifting to that mindset even more, and I'm not the youngest in the room by any means, but I'm also not super old. I've noticed that, like, one of my goals for 2024 is to switch most of my clothing over to USA made clothing. I was like, okay, that's something I really care about and I believe in. Not to mention, I've worn through so much crappy clothing now, just from working physically intensive jobs or just, I run my stuff very hard, especially my clothing because it's on me every day. I was like, I'm okay spending that extra dollar, knowing that it's probably going to last longer, knowing that I'm supporting U.S. manufacturing and I'm actually like helping someone and not some factory worker who's paid 10 cents a day and barely can afford to eat sort of thing. I was like, okay, I feel good spending those dollars and I can go to sleep knowing that that money was well spent in a way that was meaningful. And I think as people's budgets tighten, I think the next generation does have that mindset. It's like, okay, I could either cut everything to the cheapest possible variable, or I can budget for value instead of just quantity.
Yeah, I think you're seeing that.
Yeah.
And I think that, I love to knock COVID and all the stuff that it caused, because I think it was very harmful to our society as a whole. But I do think it added value in that space where people did start to see the value of very high quality things that last. And kind of got away from the consumer society where they just bought the cheapest thing available, and whenever it broke, they threw it away and bought another one. Now they're looking for things of value that will, 20 years from now, they'll still be able to have that item that they purchased and they use their hard-earned money for. But I think that's also a mindset that has gone all the way down to like their food. The ag products they're buying, they want to be higher quality. You know.
Oh, I talk with my wife about that all the time. I was like, hey, like, we don't have any kids yet. I was like, well, when we have kids, like, I really, like, I think about that a lot more. And I was like, I don't want to just feed them junk all the time. I was like, as someone, like, I didn't have the luxury of eating a lot of healthy food growing up, and I think I dealt with the consequences of that for a long time. And I've switched most of my diet over to healthier, less processed products. I mean, I'm not perfect, guys. It is expensive. Like I've said that before, but it's like there is a noticeable change. I don't say there's a noticeable change in that consumer spending. Is like, hey, like I do really want to put food of value in my body, and I've noted like that's also the other thing is I think it costs more per unit, but you might not be paying more per like quality. If you eat quality food, chances are you're either going to have more energy and you're going to have to eat less, or it's going to fill you up better in a way that's going to help you actually eat less food in the long run. And Joe Rogan talks about this, and I love it. Joe Rogan eats almost an entire carnivore diet, which is something that's very like for a long time the food pyramid told you no, you can't do that, that's really unhealthy. Joe Rogan has nothing but good things to say about it because he eats quality meat. He doesn't feel like he's going to have a heart attack because he's eating quality food that actually helps him focus more. And I bet you he eats less than most people of his size because he's putting quality protein into his body. So I'm not advocating for the carnivore diet. I think some fruits and vegetables are good for you. Those are plenty. That's just my opinion. But it's one of those things like, okay, yes, there is proof out there that quality food is actually going farther than your crap food. Has anyone ever felt good eating McDonald's? No. I always ask people, like, do you ever feel satisfied after leaving McDonald's? And people are like, no, I want more fries, or I feel gross, I feel greasy.
Well, with any of these highly processed carbohydrate foods, like as you eat more of them, you feel even more crappy. But your body desires more of them, because of all the sugars and whatever else that are in there. Your body just gets used to that full. I don't know. I don't even think it's a full feeling. It's just a feeling of like any carbohydrate food. Like your body becomes somewhat addicted to it, even though it makes your body feel bad. And then as you eat more nutritious food and you wean the carbohydrates out of your diet. You require less food to feel good. Like, you don't have to feel like the need to snack on a vanilla wafer all the time.
Oh, man.
Or a Cheez-It.
Cutting processed sugar out of my diet has been one of the things that is I don't think about a lot. But, man, every time I go back to, like, I'll have, like, a soda or something, and I go back to, like, I want more. You
Yeah,
want more, and you
it's
just
addicting.
it is, and that's how your brain chemistry works. There's a bunch of the science is super well documented. Which, by the way, isn't it funny that we're talking about this as like industrial grain farmer
Yeah.
guy who's very passionate about supporting industrial ag in the anyways, see, I want to add on to that. The reason we say both sides of the story is because both sides of the story are still relevant. We still need farmers like Neil growing the crops he does to feed the people we do. I talk people all the time whenever we talk about feeding the world and they see someone combining soybeans or corn and they're like, it's just going to cattle feed. And I was like, do you eat pork, beef, or chicken? You still ate it. Like, it's still a part of that, and that's how we get proteins into our diet is through meat like that. It is an affordable way to get proteins in your body. Anyways, all that to say is we play both sides of the coin because both sides are equally as important. We support the system we have knowing that it is performing the function it's supposed to have. We don't we aren't okay with it just being the same forever, though. That's the difference. We sit here thinking 10 years ahead, like we want it to be this way because I think we will all win because of it.
I agree. This is where Clayton and I agree very wholeheartedly. Is like the industry as a whole. Do we like the way it is consisted? Not 100%, but in the short term, because we don't have a farm to consumer system in the United States set up yet, that doesn't mean it will never be set up. And but in the short term, we have to fill the gap with what we have, which is the industrial food system. And we don't need to be arrogant enough to think that, hey, we're just providing America's food right now. We're providing food for a lot of the world along with America. So we don't need to be arrogant as a society and say, hey, that industrial food system needs to dry up overnight and go away. Because ultimately, if we did do that, a lot of people would be hungry. They would starve.
Do you know what stores really well on a shipping container going overseas? Grain.
That's
Industrial
right.
grain.
Industrial grain stores very easily and well. And in a disaster scenario where, we needed that supply, it's there and readily available, and people ultimately aren't going to starve from it. So, does industrial ag need to go away rapidly? No, it just needs us to address its shortcomings, and that is one of the reasons we started the agriculture podcast.
Yeah.
Is to help join the conversation of trying to figure out how we work through some of these logistical and capital issues to get to the point where you can look at the American food system and be proud of what it's supplying for your family and feel very good about who you're buying from and what you're buying when you buy it from them.
Yeah. And like I'm saying this right now as something we can clip out and put on the internet. If you are if you eat food, that's my hook right there. If you eat food, you need to listen to this podcast. Why do you need to listen to this podcast? Okay, I'm gonna restart that. If you eat food, you should care about this and you should listen to people like us. It doesn't have to be us, but you have to understand the industrial food system is not as bad as everyone's made it out to be. And also, the people within the industrial food system are not as complacent as they are made out to be. They are for you because they are like you. They are just as much a consumer of this food as you are. They are not shipping in their food from overseas because our U.S. food system is so bad. Their livelihoods depend on this food. And they also depend on this food to like live every day. So hear that and know, hey, we want you a part of this conversation and we want you to hopefully get more involved. That is super important to us. We want this to be a bridge into being more involved in our food systems because we are never going to have a utopian society, but we can imagine some really cool things that can happen, and that's only going to happen with more people being involved in this.
That's right. You got to have ultimately you got to have a consumer willing to buy the product you're going to produce, and I totally agree. Like me as a producer of industrial food, I realize that I don't have a perfect system for every, especially nutritionally minded consumer. but I want to. I want to develop my farm so I am sustainable into the next couple of generations. That, as far as I can see down the road, I want my kids to have the ability uh, to have some opportunities I didn't have, because at the time, I think 10 years ago, I wasn't even thinking about this. My dad definitely wasn't, and a lot of the other industrial food producers weren't either. But as time has gone, we know our consumers want additional products. It's just us coming into the knowledge and capital realization and logistical issues that we are having to work our way through to figure out how to get to the point that we're providing the product and service that our consumer is looking for us to produce.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I think it's not only just this farm. I think there's lots of farms looking at this, and there is lots of people in this agriculture space that are willing to discuss, write books, do podcasts, videos. It's not only us doing this. There's others. We want to be the spot that you come to talk and listen about this, but ultimately find you somebody that you enjoy listening to and enjoy talking with, or just and get it into the conversation so we can move this forward.
Yeah, and if you guys run into a farmer that if you just happen to run into them, I don't know why you would if you don't work on a farm, but if you do, like, encourage them, be like, hey, like, if they don't have any thoughts or ideas about this, say, hey, if you started growing some food that I could buy right from you, I'd buy it. Tell them that. That'll really get their mind turning.
It will. That'll spur their
If
imagination.
you had someone come up to you say, hey, if you ever did that, I'd buy that from you, what an encouragement that would be to be like, oh, I already have my first customer. Like, I should think about that, because who knows who else could be thinking stuff like that. Like, that's like that's such an encouragement that I'm not a farmer, but I would take that and be like, I should plant a garden next year.
Yeah, I got to meet a guy just about I don't know, it may have been 6 months ago now, that just he was a traditional producer of very similar to this farm, and he got into the niche of growing pumpkins, and now he says pumpkins are his favorite things to produce, and he produces it not only for um, like a niche decoration product. He also produces it for like processing for food, and that's what it took for him, is just somebody saying, hey, if you would if you made a small pumpkin farm, I would come visit it, and he took it from there, and has grown it into an entire business. Just somebody encouraging him a little bit. So sometimes that's all it takes, is to get these. There's people with innovative thought processes, and if their imagination spurred a little bit, man, they can take a business to, you know, to the moon.
One of the most stressful parts about running a business is the sales and customer side of it. It's always I can do this really cool thing, but is anyone going to care? And so just anyone knowing that, hey, there is someone who would want to buy this is just such a big encouragement, because I've met some geniuses that I'm like, the only reason holding you back from starting something is your lack of self-confidence. And I'm like, you meet guys sometimes like, man, you could be a very successful person. You just really, you have a hard time taking that first step. And
I think that's a lot of people.
yeah.
Especially, like I've met so many, well, just for farmers, for instance, I've met so many talented farmers in my life that could do so much with the location they're in, or the abilities they have, if they were just willing to step out and take another risk on top of the risk they're already taking. And a lot of them aren't. They've been successful in their niche that they're in, corn and beans or wheat or whatever, hogs or cows, and they're not willing to take that additional. They're in an inherently risky business, and without some type of encouragement or some type of model that they can look at and know they can be successful, it's very hard for them to take additional risk. But they're very qualified to take those risks and probably be super successful in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So if you're out there, I said it last week, but I'll say it again. If you're out there and you're a producer and you're thinking about doing something like it, like take the risk. The opportunity is ripe. It might be really hard for a few years, but you get a few years in, you look back, and you're like, man, I'd be an idiot to stop me back then. It's like the opportunity's there, and there are people who will buy your product. I will tell you this right now: the customers are there. Figure out how to find them, grow the product, figure out how to find those customers. There's your business model.
That's right.
And probably file your taxes and maybe like an LLC or something. Like do the things to make sure you don't get put in prison for tax fraud. But like the business plan is there. Grow something people want, find the people who want it, distribute it to the people who want it. And there's a bunch of complicated things in between there that we talked about today, but the basics are there. And at the very least, you could get cash flowing within a year to 16 months.
Yeah, I think that the desire for the consumer to purchase these goods is there, and now it just is required for innovative minds to figure out how to get those products to the consumer that wants them.
Yeah. And so I know for a fact, I know this without a doubt, there are online marketplaces now all over the place that you can list your farm on and sell your goods on there. I have probably like 5 of them who follow me on Instagram, and they're all trying to do the same thing. I don't have any experience with any of them, but there is also resources out there already for you. There's software out there already for you that are going to allow you to help find those customers, and also farmers markets. Farmers markets are not the easiest way to make big money by any means, but they're a really easy way to get product in front of people because every single Saturday during the summer in our hometown, there's a farmer's market and there are a lot of regulars who go there and they're always interested in the new person who shows up.
Sure. I mean, once and I think this is with if you create a very high quality product and you start to be able to deliver it to a certain market and people see that product and then you get it to the point where you can open a storefront, people are going to come seeking that storefront out, and then you can sell additional products.
Oh, yeah.
So all it takes is somebody willing to create a high-quality product and then able to sustainably deliver that product timely, and then you have the ready-made customer that is going to continually come and buy your product.
Yeah, and that's also the beauty of food is people do need it like 3 times a day, and if you can score one lifelong customer, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of food.
That's a lot of that's a lot of food that you're gonna have to figure out to grow, but that's also like a lot of money that you can count on pretty regularly flowing through your business. And so, customer acquisition will probably like finding the customers is probably going to be the most complicated part, but like it's not like they're not there. They're there, and if you do your due diligence, I think you could still find them pretty easily. I don't want to talk anyone out of this. It's like do your work. Social media is a beautiful thing these days. You could spend $300 on an ad on Facebook and Instagram. You draw a circle of where you want that ad to be played, and it will show up in people's Instagram feeds who have those interests. I get ads like that all the time on my Instagram, and I have never bought beef or anything farm related online. I always have bought it locally, but I still get ads for it all the time. So it works. It works. And if I had more willingness to spend more money right now, I would be probably searching those options out a little more. So.
And that is definitely a thing that's so fascinating to me is that marketing is so targeted and focused now. Is if you have a niche market or a niche product that you want to deliver to a certain market, there's marketing available to get that product knowledge to the consumer so he can know that your product's available to him or her. That technology that we didn't have 30 years ago is available now through Facebook, any types of social media, and there's no reason you shouldn't utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's available. Use it.
Amen to that. So, okay, well, we're going to end that then. Neil keeps getting phone calls, and I'm getting a little cold here sitting in the shop. So, we're going to wrap this up. If you guys yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, please share. If we encourage you to do something big, let us know. We'd love to hear that. If you ever have any questions about marketing or growing a good garden, Neil and I both are happily able to give advice at some point. So follow us on Instagram, get a hold of us there. We can maybe be of some little bit of help. But yeah, stay safe, stay farming, or stay whatever you're doing. And we'll see you in a couple weeks or
Yeah,
next week.
and if you have a, successful story in this business that you could share and you're willing to share, we'd love to have you on the podcast and
Yeah, absolutely.
and let you talk about it. It'd be exciting for us to hear, and we want our listeners to be able to. To be along with us on this journey, so we all are learning something and bettering ourselves and bettering the industry as a whole. Appreciate your time. Like, share, and subscribe.
Yep. See ya.